Well, hey, everybody, this is Chris DeFurio with Keys to the Shop. Welcome to another episode of Shift Break. I hope you're doing good today. Today's episode is brought to you by the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer from Voga Coffee. Quality is obviously important to our coffee bars. The experience that people have is limited to a to-go cup, but what is in that cup is kind of limited to the technology that we have to extract from the coffee what it has to offer until now, until Ground Control came along. It really unlocks the kind of flavors that you never really thought possible from the coffee. It takes it to another level. And it's not only coffee. You can make hot chocolate, you can make tea, cold brew, batched iced lattes. And as we're trying to have creative solutions to issues that we have in retail right now, having something as versatile, high quality, and as beautiful as the Ground Control Brewer in your store is a must. Find out more information by going to the website vogacoffee.com. That's VOGA coffee.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Flair Espresso, makers of all lever press espresso machines. And, this is coming from somebody who's spent 20 years in specialty coffee. I've never had an espresso machine in my house until I bought my Flair Pro 2, and it is another world. I can have cafe quality espresso in my kitchen, small footprint, a fraction of the price of a traditional home espresso machine, and it's so well made and easy to use. This is the kind of thing I think every coffee professional should have in their kitchen and be able to stock in their store to give their guests an entry point that is affordable and easy to make your coffee as espresso in their house. It drives whole bean sales in your coffee shop, and it just really helps people love your coffee even more. Right now, you can get 5% off your entire order when you use the checkout code Keys to the Flair when you're checking out over at flairespresso.com. Again, 5% off your entire order when you go to flairespresso.com and use the code Keys to the Flair. It's a very generous offer, an amazing machine, and I'm definitely so thankful I got mine. And I wish for you the same kind of espresso-fueled happiness that I have. So go get yours now over at flairespresso.com. Okay, everybody. So today I wanted to briefly talk to you about something that's been on my radar for a little bit now. This is something that I'm actually in the middle of right now with a couple of clients, and it's something that I've seen online as well, and it has to do with operations manuals and barista manuals. One of the things I love is a great manual and good communication that's values-driven, values-based, and having a great manual is absolutely critical. Whether you're just starting out or not, you have to have a source of good communication that is not just, your words to people when they're first hired, but is something that they can reference going forward. Now, the trouble comes when we start to examine our attitudes towards tools that we have in our tool belt when they relate to how successful our business is. This is the idea that we apply to the menu creation. It's the idea we apply to the hiring process and to the creation of a manual. And there's this idea or notion that if we just get this perfect and get it right and have the world's best onboarding process, the world's best manual, the world's best, hiring questions and things like that, then what's going to happen is our business will be successful. People will stay on. No, we won't have people leaving because we'll have hired the right people and they have read the right words in the manual and so forth. A lot of faith is being put in these tools, but not in the people that are using them or should be using them. But what happens, unfortunately, is that we devise this amazing manual and then it gets shoved underneath the counter for the remainder of the next 2 years. I talked about this with Garrett Oden, our guest, this past Tuesday on the show, talking about coffee, the messaging that you have as a coffee bar. It's a really great episode. If you haven't listened to that, I would encourage you to. But, the manual is something that as a tool needs to be utilized in order for it to be effective. And in fact, it's the other way around. It's not that the manual is effective because you use it. It's that you're effective because you're involved. It's because you are a present leader. And the best manual in the world is nothing without follow through, without hands-on leadership. So you can have the best handbook in the world, but if you don't have hands-on leadership, it's worthless. It doesn't mean anything. And if we're being honest with ourselves, half of the documents that we create for ourselves are just exercises in trying to figure it out for ourselves. They're not created for our staff. They're created for our own benefit of just getting our ideas down on paper. And then we get just all, twisted in knots when our baristas don't do what the paper says. Oh gosh, isn't it so easy? Just do what the paper says. Gosh. Can people read? They signed off on the manual and they're not following the manual. That means I need to let them go or I need to punish them. And we can tend to excuse these harsh reactions because we have put so many of our hopes and dreams into this manual because it was hard to write it, because it was a soul-searching journey to come up with our core values. And so now going forward, we feel like, well, this had better work. And if it's not working, then gosh, it's not our fault. It's got to be somebody else's fault. We're just not hiring the right people because we put a lot of work into this manual. And so if they're not delivering what they read, then who's to blame? Well, the answer is us as leaders. We're to blame because we in some way have abdicated our responsibility, just given up our responsibility to be present. And instead, we have created sort of a surrogate leader in the form of a binder. This binder is what you should use instead of bothering me, is what we kind of insinuate when we give people this large tome of a binder. Writing the best manual, coming up with your core values, having a great onboarding system, and putting a ton of work into hiring the right people and even training them. All of that in terms of its importance and how hard it is, it pales in comparison to long-term, consistent, present care and leadership. That is what keeps people in the organization, and it's what proves your values over time. So the reason why people aren't following your manual might just be looking at you in the mirror. And that's what we have to do as leaders. We have to examine, well, what is the breakdown? The breakdown happens after the initial training, after the excited onboarding, talking about seed to cup, talking about our values, our awesome equipment, watching people pour their first heart. It's all so great and wonderful until 6 months later when you realize you haven't seen that manager in a long time. You haven't seen the boss in a long time, and no one's really coaching you, and they just refer you to a manual all the time. And this is just not the environment that people want to be in. It's not rewarding. It's not nurturing. It's not they're not growing as professionals. We tend to start with a roar and then finish with a whimper. We need steady leadership. And without that, our manuals are worthless. We need both. And that's always going to be something that I want to give my clients and help work towards is clarity through documentation and systems. Those are great. But systems are made for the benefit of the people. And people need to be led by other people, not by pieces of paper. So I hope that this episode was helpful for you. And this is something that I've had to learn the hard way on many occasions. And I hope that you can approach this in a holistic way. So thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you here next week on another edition of Shift Break, from keys to the shop.